Sport is not more important than life. It's not. It's a sport. Put it in perspective. Who cares whether he carries on boxing? That's not the thing. You know, human lives have been lost. You can never. That's price. You can't get them back. It's priceless. You can't get it back. What does boxing matter? You know what I mean? It don't matter one bit. That's what I'm saying to you. It's like, but sometimes you get these reality checks in life.
And his family, and it's been a very, very difficult few weeks. And yesterday was a beautiful but brutal day, and yeah, I don't know how I got.
Even Tim, I was walking out, then I got tapped on the shoulder. I turned around, it was Andy Joshua. You know what I mean? And we had a brief chat and a little embrace and that, and then and then I left. But it was, yeah. You know, funerals are never.
The world of professional boxing has always been a theater of the unexpected, but few figures have managed to blur the lines between legitimate sport and high-stakes performance art quite like Jake Paul. As we look at the landscape of his career moving into 2026, the narrative surrounding the problem child has shifted from one of a disruptive YouTuber to a man entangled in a web of financial volatility, legal threats, and persistent allegations of fight fixing. The conversation is no longer just about whether he can actually box. It is about the very mechanics of the spectacle he has created, and whether that spectacle is finally beginning to crumble under its own weight. One of the most jarring developments in recent times has been the reporting from figures like Stephen A. Smith, who has not minced words when discussing Paul's financial standing. According to Smith,
it's just sad. It just makes you realise how valuable life is and how things can change in a heartbeat. So when we talk about fights and we talk about beefs and, you know, these things are just nothing when it comes to real life and losing your life. So it was a sad thing to hear, a sad thing to see. God knows how it'll affect those that saw it mentally, emotionally. But you've got to think about these two men who were somebody's child, someone's brother. And that's what you've got to think about. Those.
The bravado we see on screen masks a much harsher reality. A man facing the brink of bankruptcy. The allegation is that the mounting legal fees from being sued for allegedly fixing his fights have finally caught up with him. Smith's assessment is cold and clinical, suggesting that once the curtain is pulled back on illegal actions or deceptive practices, the consequences become an unavoidable avalanche. In Smith's view, the risk was never worth the reward, and the fallout we are seeing now was an inevitable conclusion to a business model built on shaky foundations. Jake Paul himself has alluded to this financial strain, albeit with a different spin. He has spoken candidly about losing staggering amounts of money, citing the demonetization of his YouTube content as a primary factor. As his content became more progressive or controversial, advertisers allegedly fled, leading to a massive dip in the revenue stream that originally built his empire. Furthermore, he has described the crushing weight of lawsuits, claiming that each legal battle drains millions of dollars from his accounts. He reflects on how quickly wealth can evaporate when you are fighting wars on multiple fronts, both in the courtroom and in the public eye. There's even talk of a mysterious firm in Los Angeles that Paul claims has stolen money from various celebrities and athletes, a situation he threatens to rectify with class action lawsuit of his own. It is a chaotic cycle of litigation that seems to define his existence as much as his training camps do. Yet, despite the financial noise, the most persistent cloud over Paul's career is the accusation that his matches are scripted. The recent bout against the legendary Mike Tyson served as a lightning rod for these claims. Observers pointed to bizarre gestures during the fight, such as Tyson repeatedly biting his boxing glove, which some interpreted as a coded signal to Paul to calm down or stick to a predetermined pace. The contrast between the ferocious, sharp Tyson seen in training clips and the hesitant, controlled version of the ring was, for many, too vast to ignore. Analysts on the Joe Rogan Experience noted that it looked less like a professional fight and more like a high-level sparring session, one where an unspoken agreement existed to ensure neither party suffered a truly devastating knockout. This perception of orchestration reached a fever pitch during the matchup with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in a moment that seemed to break the fourth wall of reality. Viewers reported that Google search results were already displaying a unanimous decision victory for Jake Paul while the fight was still only in its seventh round. This glitch in the matrix fueled a social media firestorm, with fans arguing that the outcome had been entered into the system long before the final bell rang. For critics, this wasn't just a technical error. It was a smoking gun proving that Paul's career is a series of carefully managed events designed to protect his mystique and his winning record. The technical analysis from seasoned boxing experts adds another layer of skepticism. Chael Sonnen, an icon of the MMA world, has pointed out the inherent absurdity of the matchmaking. In any other era of the sweet science, a novice with barely a dozen professional bouts would never be allowed in the same zip code as an Olympic champion or a former unified heavyweight king like Anthony Joshua. Sonnen argues that if boxing is a real sport, the skill gap should be insurmountable. He noted with frustration that Joshua, despite his massive physical advantages and decades' experience, seemed unable or unwilling to cut off the ring and corner the much smaller Paul. To a veteran like Sonnen, the sight of a world-class predator failing to hunt down an elusive novice is baffling unless there's a subtext of the fight that the public isn't privy to. On the other side of the argument, defenders like Ariel Helwani and Joe Rogan suggest that while the fights may be spectacles, calling them scripted ignores the massive legal risks involved. They argue that a platform like Netflix or a fighter with a legacy of Anthony Joshua would never risk federal prison for a fixed sports outcome. Helwani, in particular, has been vocal about his growing respect for Paul, noting the sheer courage it takes to step through the ropes at all. In the Joshua fight, for instance, many analysts saw Paul's unfriendly defensive style, often described as getting on a bicycle and riding around the ring, as a legitimate survival tactic. It wasn't that the fight was fixed. It was that Paul knew he was outclassed and fought the only way he could to avoid being flattened in the first 30 seconds. This brings us to the core of the Jake Paul business model. The heel persona. Paul has successfully leaned into the role of the villain, understanding that people will pay just as much to see him lose as they will see him win. He targets opponents who possess name recognition but carry significant physical disadvantages, whether it be age, a lack of boxing-specific experience, or a decline in their prime years. By fighting legends like Mike Tyson at 57 years old, he creates a no-win situation for his critics. If he wins, he beat an old man. If he loses, he lost their grandfather. Yet, the check's still clear, and the viewership numbers continue to break records. However, the moral cost is beginning to weigh on the sports community. Many felt a deep sense of sadness watching Mike Tyson, a man who should be enjoying a peaceful retirement, being bought for a payday. The sentiment is that icons of Tyson's stature shouldn't have to put their brain health on the line for $20 million, especially a match that feels more like a choreographed dance than a genuine contest. Critics like Tony Jeffries have tried to defend the action, suggesting that Tyson wasn't holding back, but was simply met with a strategic response from Paul, but that narrative struggles to take hold against the visual evidence of a legend looking like a shadow of his former self. As we navigate through 2026, the question remains, how long can this experiment last? Paul continues to insist that his goal is a cruiserweight world title, but the road to actual championship gold is paved with fighters who aren't looking for a payday or a sparring arrangement. They are young, hungry, and dangerous. To get to that level, Paul would have to abandon the safety of the spectacle and engage in the real boxing that analysts like Dan Raphael and promoters like Eddie Hearn have been calling for.